This week on RSBANDB Update, we take the time out of our Lore Diggers episode to cover new 110 runecrafting tidbits, including time runes, spells, and weapon crafting. Then we dig deep on the desert god Pantheon. We cover the major and minor gods, and where the story may go next. This is RSBANDB Update, episode 1023, recorded Thursday, January 30th, 2025. Elder God runes when? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of RSBANDB Update. This week, we have a Lore Diggers for you on the Menethite Desert Pantheon, and, of course, right-click re-examine 110 runecrafting, among some other things, and to do that, of course, the Lore Diggers are here. Zerdones, welcome.
Howdy, howdy. Gonna dig in some sand.
Yep, digging in the sand and talking about some of RuneScape's, I'll just say, lesser talked about characters. But Avernick, you're also here. Welcome back.
Thank you. Feels like we do these and it sounds like it's going to be a nice, quaint show, and then other stuff gets piled on top.
Yeah, I mean, at least
how dare the world move on?
At least
how
it's
dare
not.
time progress.
At least it's not like monetization stuff, right?
Yes, this will be a happier conversation this time.
Yes, indeed, of course. Avernick has been with us for a while now, guest on Quest Week, Lore Week, member of the Scrying Pool in-game, and moderator now on the official Discord for the lore and design stuff, so you can probably see him there too. But
don't give me away.
Oh, yeah. I saw you in there. You have a nice, I think it's like a purple crown or something?
I think we're pink for
pink.
The year.
Okay. I couldn't tell whether that was pink or purple, but anyways. In the meantime, of course, I just want to give a big, huge thank you to our experienced tier Patreon members for whom without update would not be possible, and they do mean everything to us. That's Amos Reed, Dominic R., Drama Free, Harry, Jason S., Jesse W., Keski, Lemon Lodge, Mr. T, Ricky A, Runestar, Aces, The Naked Captain, and Tim. Big, huge thank you to all of these people, and you'll hear more about our Patreon offerings a little bit later in the podcast. But in the meantime, if you want to follow along, full show notes can be found at update.show. We also have our community Discord over at update.show/Discord, and the Friends chat can be found in-game at BitsBytes. All right, so 110 runecrafting. That is coming in the near future, and we got an entirely different. It feels like this is an entirely different design than what we first heard about, based on feedback and whatnot, minus a few things.
I think there's a flashier front end now.
Yeah. Well, we've got more art assets than we had last time, which I think is reasonable.
Things,
yeah.
They're moving away from combination runes.
That's definitely the biggest part. That wasn't received well.
Yeah,
the combination runes weren't. You mean?
Combination runes, which is kind of ironic in that I feel like there's usually a call for reworking content, and then we're usually told there's no time to do that. You guys need new content, and they're like, no, rework the content. And then this time it's like they got rid of the reworking the content and gave us new content, and everyone's very happy.
Yeah. I get it. I still think it's kind of a shame because I thought the combination rune idea was actually really nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'd be a little bit biased because I think we talked about combination runes in the monthly bit we did.
Well,
about
yeah,
this.
that's exactly the funny thing is that we talked about future skills to 110, and I think the combination rune stuff was something that we hit on for that. So
yeah, I mean it's definitely not good in the place it is right now, but to be fair, they did talk about they wanted to rework how that worked, so combination runes wouldn't be so painful to make.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's a shame, but I kind of
they said the concept had potential, and the initial concerns highlighted that it added complexity without significantly enhancing gameplay. So players expressed worries about upkeep and creation mechanics, which they agree detracted from the experience. And combination runes will be an interest for potential future updates, but won't be a part of the 110 runecrafting changes. And
if you have to explain why you have to be excited, you failed your job.
Right,
so
right. In general, there's a rule: if you're explaining, you're losing.
Right.
Unless you're doing something.
This is the easier. This is the easier win.
I mean, I feel like it might have gone over better if there had been more of a. I mean, like, you're right. I hear what you're saying. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
If you're explaining, you're losing. But at the same time, like, the original right-click examine was basically, we want to fix combination runes. How are we going to fix that? Don't worry about it. We'll figure that out later. And that leaves a lot of room for players to insert their own ideas, and that can go downhill really quickly. So I feel like it might have gone better if they had a more concrete idea of, this is how we're going to fix combination runes. This is, and I mean, guess they did that a little bit, but
they did a little bit, but not directly in the blog. Like, there were a lot of little comments, like, we do want to get rid of talismans, or not related to combination runes, but like, oh no, the pouch is going to be much bigger than the minimum we said. So they had to give a lot of like little justifications on the side that I think you lost the plot at that point.
Well, and I think if they had some of that stuff a little bit more nailed down and presented that, I think that might have gone over better. Or like you were saying, Avernick in pre-show, having a list of spells that they were going to add.
Oh yeah, that absolutely. As we talked through this blog, the thing getting 90% of the attention is the big reward block.
Yeah,
which of course it is.
What can you do with it?
Yeah, and like my thing right now is that there's nothing to distinguish a combination rune between the regular runes except for the ground up mud rune. And the issue with that is, like you said, you can put your own idea in there, and if that idea diverges wildly from what Jagex does, then you are in a situation where players don't like it. So
a weird balance with these right-click examines where they want to put it out at a point where it's open-ended enough to get the feedback, but open-ended is
they can still change it.
Lead to dissent.
Yeah.
There's a point where it's so open-ended that there's almost nothing to talk about except this is what we thought about. What do you think?
Yeah. So without further ado, the new rune is the Time rune. And I gotta say, I got a funny story on this. Back in the day when this podcast was in its infancy, for April Fools or something to that effect, or I don't know what it was for, I suggested Jagex add time runes to the game. Way, way back in the day. And anybody who's been here since way back when will be able to back me up on that. Ping Lord Earth in the RSBANDB Discord if you don't believe me, but it's nice that my time rune idea is finally coming into game. I'll say I know I didn't suggest it this time, but there it is.
Playing the long game.
If you gave me 99 guesses as to what it would be, I probably wouldn't have guessed time rune. I feels on like that edge of like going back to like the sci-fi-ness, but I think they have enough going on with some of the ideas. I probably would have guessed Wrath rune. I feel like that's the
old school
slam dunk.
Yeah, Wrath is the obvious one.
But this is if they're inspired by it, all means.
Yeah, and classic Hourglass, and you look at all the other things, and in particular B3, the clock face. That's what my time rune imagery looked like back in the day, clock face. So,
a little too meta, I think that.
Yeah,
they went with the simple one, which is the right answer. Cause that's
I
always look like
I like the hourglass.
I don't get the arrows.
Forward progression.
It's a little too much thinking. Yeah, I think I would have been fine with B2. That's just enough detail that I'm okay with it. But maybe that looks more like a hieroglyph.
Yeah, I think there's not a huge difference between B1 and B2, I don't think.
And isn't B4 a planetary sign?
I'm not immediately familiar with it. It calls to mind an alchemical symbol.
Yeah. That is...
like astrology.
It almost looks like the Saturn symbol thing. Which is interesting. Is there anything associated with Saturn in time? Anybody here with a astrology background?
Saturn, I think Saturn in mythology is the god of time.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, Saturn
it's a Roman thing.
God of time. Yeah.
Huh. We
I don't recognize. I don't recognize the symbol as being specifically his, but it doesn't mean it isn't.
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from, but if you Google Saturn planetary sign, it comes up.
Okay, so
So
Oh, so would that make A2 and 3 they were trying to make Saturn?
I got the impression it was just supposed to be like rotation.
Planetary.
I thought A2 and A3
planetary.
looked like the nuclear atomic physics stuff.
Ooh, small.
Oh, that could be too. My first thought was
That's
like
way too sci-fi.
planet orbiting the sun.
I am so glad they didn't do A1 because you know what happens after you make one with a jazz symbol on it? You get 10 years of people asking for the other 3.
Yeah. When Elder God runes. WEN. LOL.
Don't sign yourself up for that.
Also, if you look at the Wikipedia page of Saturn, it is listed as the Saturn symbol. So
Okay.
Oh, there you go. You nailed it. Didn't even know it.
yeah. All right. So of course, to use a rune, you're going to need spells, and we don't know what the levels are for these, but balancing is not finalized. Temporal Paradox, gather double resources when woodcutting, mining, fishing, and targeting empty box traps to catch double creatures at the cost of greatly reduced XP, a lunar spell. Faster rock opportunities, lunar spell. Replenish
Very nice.
essence, reaches in time, and fills the backpack and any pouches and familiars and worn outfits with pure essence. Has a long cooldown.
That
So it's
sounds
sort of-
like would be training meta defining if that is
Yeah.
a spell they go
Yeah,
with. Like you
that's
have
like,
to account for that in everything.
And I
It's
assume
like
it would
power
have to be in
burst
the
from the
bank.
opposite
It wouldn't
direction.
just pull it out of thin air.
No, I think that the only purpose for this would be to pull it out of thin air at altar,
Yeah.
like get 2 runs at once. That's why it has the long cooldown, so you can't do it every time.
I see.
But
Yeah, you
that one
basically
I think
double
would
your-
have to be like a late RC unlock. I don't think you can just have that.
No.
Yeah, that I would expect that to be a high level spell.
So
I
you,
mean-
like at a certain level of runecrafting, then you incorporate it into the training account.
I mean,
accounting
we're
for XP.
assuming. I would have to assume that the new rune is going to be the tier 100 rune. So I'd
Oh,
assume
the rune will be
it's
hell, but you can buy the rune whenever, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Longer Lumberjack's intuition for some minutes. Any Lumberjack intuition buffs you receive will increase in duration by a number of seconds. That's a quick buff on what we had.
Good with those the rock opportunity one. I think
Yeah.
both of those would be
Yeah.
solid.
Moving on to standard spells, advanced time. Advance time forward for one of a variety of options, including things such as archaeology research, ports voyages, and resetting daily mineable sandstone can only be cast a number of times a week.
So
A weird one.
Reduce time locks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Temporal anomaly for 12 minutes gives a chance to reset the cooldown of a magic ability when cast, scales to the according magic power armor damage bonus. As this is an aspect, only one can be active at a time. Therefore, a choice must be made between spells and incantations such as Animate Dead and Darkness. So it fits in that same sort of darkness Animate Dead spot.
This would be the animate dead killer because DPS is always going to outrank tanking every day of the week.
Yeah. Which I think is actually really neat when you put it on that and you put it in the standard spellbook. So. Crumble Undead's coming back potentially with this as an auto-ghast ability.
It's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Be neat.
30% increased base damage against undead enemies, and we found how many of those there were in Necroscape when we were training that.
Well, everyone with their salves, yes.
Can you imagine pairing this with Salve Amulet? Ooh.
And Undead Slayer.
Forecath delete.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of teleports. Western Khazari Jungle on Lunar, Mountain Camp on Lunar.
Clues.
Those are two clues related. Western Anachronia and Eastern Anachronia on Standard. I feel like we got the short end of the stick there.
How come?
Do we need teleports to Anachronia?
Yeah, I get the Eastern Anachronia teleport, quick teleport to Big Game Hunter. I don't get the Western one. What's
Is
off
it
in
west where
Western
all the
Anachronia?
lamp and floor are? Or one of those file blooms? It's all,
Lamp
it would be a,
and Floor is
like
kind of
Slayer
in the
stuff.
middle.
Like the
I know you got like the mushroom patch there at the western end.
Yeah. We have a teleport. Well, you can put a totem of teleport there.
Yeah.
You can.
So you can put a teleport there. I don't. Yeah, like what?
I think
don't know
teleports are
what
probably going to be the easiest thing for them to add. So if there's whatever, one or two or whatever.
Well, and let's also look at it from this perspective too, because what have all the players said about Anachronia in the past?
Sucks to traverse.
It's too difficult to traverse and get around. So if you can get to the western edge or the eastern edge as it would be, then that would be great. I mean, western edge, you could go for southwest and put it near the archaeology and mining area, but that's kind of near the Ranch Out of Time boat, I guess.
That's what I was just about to say, is there is the light Anamika mining spot.
Yeah.
Or, sorry, dark Anamika?
Dark Anamika is northeast, I believe,
okay.
yeah. And then Lost Grove teleport.
Yeah. No ancient spells suggested, which is I feel like they just know they want that's already popular.
Doesn't need more.
No, yeah, ancient doesn't need more. It's well spoken for with Insight Fear and Animate Dead and everything that we got with this insistence spell. So I think we're okay on that side of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this makes sense because ancient is what you want to be on for combat, and then this now gives
you another
Lunars.
reason.
Lunars is the skilling spell book. This makes sense.
Yeah, and you now have the option of doing Temporal Anomaly for standard spellbook magic with Crumble Undead or, powerful fire spell. So
yeah, it makes the standard spellbook, gives it a reason to be used in combat.
Yeah. So another big thing that they changed out with this was the weapon creation side of it. The initial design was that you had to bring the inert weapon with you while runecrafting, and some of the runes you would create would be siphoned by the weapon to imbue and upgrade it, and this would repeat similar to smithing and fletching. They said during playtesting, the weapons ended up feeling more like a byproduct than the main goal.
I think that's
it sounded very much like an urn.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
So with player feedback, discussing the concept and experiments internally, they decided to redesign this so that the updated approach shifts the focus to the weapon itself and introduces new steps. So they want to still keep the core loop and identity of the skill with the altar running, and by using essence as the ingredient for upgrading weapons. So as such, you will now use eternal magic logs to create an inert wand, orb, or staff. You then bring your regular runecrafting loadout, essence, and an inert weapon to an altar, and then you start imbuing the weapon using pure essence, eventually upgrading it from its inert version to a wieldable level 85 weapon. Essence will be consumed one by one, contributing to the progress of the weapon over time. And this can be repeated until it becomes a +5 variant where it can be used as a level 90 weapon or sacrificed to make the burial or martial type weaponry for more XP.
I feel like there's an interesting balance question here about how much XP you give this, because
right.
My first thought was, this should give a lot of XP because you're sacrificing.
You're not making runes.
Yeah, you're not making runes. But they also make a good point that it's a lot less click intensive. So traditional runecrafting, rune making training, that's going to be a weird distinction to make, but traditional runecrafting is in a kind of a weird spot where it's pretty high XP, like it's simultaneously high XP, high action, and at least conceivably high reward because you get output. Some of those outputs are going to be more or less economically valuable. Some of them are going to be more or less skilling valuable. But it kind of hits all boxes of the triangle. So where do you put this? Like, do you make it big XP?
Right. And
change for AFK?
I think you have to just know it's not going to be big money. So I think it is not big money, so therefore it's big XP and AFK.
So remember,
big XP and AFK, that doesn't seem to make sense.
So it's low XP, low money, just AFK?
Yeah, like how that's what I mean. Like, it's an interesting question. Like, how
because
do you make this
you
equation
have you have Runespan, which, let's be honest, post 99 isn't going to be wonderful XP. Then you have the Soul Runecrafting at level 90, which is going to be about 400 to 450k an hour. And then if you're really cracked up, you can do the Necromancy Runecrafting training for north of 500k XP an hour right now, as is. So the question is, do you displace any of these and put something in that's more than 500k XP an hour?
No, probably. You're probably not higher. You're probably a little less, but not a lot less.
And if you don't, then what niche does this fill, really?
Right.
AFK.
Because that's the same thing. People have their methods down for running between between the smithy and the runecrafting altars, right? So,
I mean, I guess it fills the AFK over 99. I guess that's the niche, like replacement for Runespan over 99.
It doesn't sound like there's going to be like a time node in the Runespan, so
they could add one, but
they could. I don't see them. I think.
I have a controversial question. Does anybody enjoy the Runespan?
I don't enjoy any runecrafting. No.
Yeah, not.
Like Runespan, really? You just go there and you put on a show and click, and there you go.
I prefer it to running altars.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not saying a lot.
I think I would agree with that. I did a lot of, when I was doing runecrafting, I did a lot of Runespan until I unlocked Souls, and then I kind of went back and forth between the two.
And what was the winner?
Pre-necromancy. Well, depending on how I was feeling that day, basically.
Okay, fair enough.
Like, Soul Runecrafting was tolerable because it wasn't absolutely... Like, I've consistently said in the past that Runecrafting pre-Souls is trash XP, and I've gotten pushback on that. I think what it really is like the XP to click ratio is atrocious. So, like, you can get good XP doing Blood Runecrafting, but you need to have a lot of buffs, you need to do it consistently.
You need to treat it like PvM.
And I hate doing all those things. So Soul Runecrafting was pretty good for me because it's a lot of clicks, but you also get a lot of XP for doing it. And not quite as many clicks as, like, Bloods. But it's still way more clicking than Runespan, so...
And you gotta keep in mind that outside of the time rune and the new spells, this is a central piece of the content. So it's got to have a good place on skill launch, or else nobody's going to do it. And if nobody does it, you're wasting time with this and money.
I think this is what the update was pitched as, and the time rune thing is kind of overtaking it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
This was supposed to be the main thing.
You're right. We're right.
And I think they're going to still follow through with it no matter what, because they already made the Masterwork sword and bow, and they need the staff process to exist in order to make the staff.
I agree with that. Huh.
But I don't know.
I just have to believe it. I just have to hope that there's going to be a reason to do the weapon creation as a training method.
I think there's always an audience for AFK stuff. Like, they'll come out of the war work, and you get to sit at the time altar as long as you want.
And that's another thing. We don't necessarily know how the time altar is going to work, do we?
I assume that, well, for runecrafting, I guess not. But for this, that they kind of spell out, you just sit there using one essence at a time into the weapon.
Yeah, this kind of sounds like charging the soul altar, basically.
This part does. So then I wouldn't assume they'd make the regular altar work that way for runes.
No, I would. I'm going to bet on
normal.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I would expect them to do sort of conventional.
What if time runes just come from PVM?
I don't think they'll ever drop from PVM.
I'm kidding. Okay. Of course.
Gave me a heart attack. I think if they could avoid putting them on PVM ever, just catalytic anima stones.
Who would drop time runes? Carapac, obviously.
And that's it. Raksha, maybe.
Anything on Anachronia is probably fair game.
Yeah, maybe Raksha.
Celestial Dragons.
Yeah, I was going to say.
That's a great one.
Yeah. Or Celestial Dragons.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Runecrafting or bust.
Yeah, I agree. I just was throwing that idea out there.
Yeah. We might have skipped over a little bit. Did you guys have any predictions where the altar will be?
Anachronia seems like the obvious answer, and that might explain the Western Anachronia
With the two teleports to it.
It's right there on the western side. That's not
What
bad.
if it's a multi-stage runecrafting thing? One bit on the eastern edge, one bit on the western edge.
That would be crazy.
And that would explain why you have two teleports to Anachronia when, I feel like people's Anachronia needs are largely solved. But
you guys wanted to use that agility course, we'll give you a reason to use that agility course.
You're going to do agility and you're going to like it.
Exactly. Runecrafting is just agility with no obstacles. You run and you run.
I don't know. I don't want to guess where it's
so
going to be. I feel like it could be anywhere because, who would have guessed the Soul Altar would be in Menaphos of all places?
Well, yeah. We didn't know anything about Menaphos at the time.
But
yeah, that's fair.
Maybe it will be in the new area that we don't know about yet.
We're not going to get the new area till the end of the year, so I don't think that.
Yeah, I know. It's probably not.
The Masterwork Staff
looks slightly different.
Yeah,
it looks cool.
It's going to be the same kind of staff that we have, or rather weapon that we've had for both 110 mining and smithing, 110 fletching and wood cutting, and now, of course, 110 rune crafting. And it will work in terms of its assembly in the same way as the Masterwork bow. And they've chosen not to reveal the information about where its components will come from, but what they can say is that essence will be required that's crafted from other weapons, much like the bow and sword before it.
And by high-tier magic weapons.
Yeah, so you basically have three choices here. It's either the tier 90s from Virago, the tier 92s from Nex, or the tier 95s
AOD.
from Sanctum. Yeah, Nex AOD.
From AOD.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What about staffs?
What staffs?
Nox staff, Staff of Sliske.
Nox is already used in the bow. Staff of Sliske, maybe.
Oh, that would give it a use
reasons
outside of
to do
its
it.
spec that people keep asking for it to be rebuilt.
But is Streaking Telos a better source than Forest Group content?
Oh my god. You're going to spike that thing to more than the SGB if they do that.
And then I think for the sword
depends
they
on
use
how good
tier
the staff
85,
is.
so I think the Cyware stuff is probably in the mix too, possibly.
Yeah, the Cyware stuff could be an option.
Maybe. I feel like that already has enough of a economic sink. Like, I'm sure there's other factors that go into what they're going to choose, but on an economic basis,
I think it's
I don't
mostly
think it's
economic.
necessary.
But yeah,
Because Planted Feet is already kind of propping that up.
And also that's how you get greater sunshine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Planted Feet.
Planted stuff,
Yeah.
yeah.
So where did the Masterwork bow come from? Oh, the Ascensions was the other one.
Yeah,
Ascensions and Nox, yeah.
Ascensions and Nox. And Drygore
Thing is-
was the Malay
Yeah.
one. So
Was Drygore Chaotix
and
and the demon stuff
Yeah.
from God War 2.
Yeah, the Furies swords. Yeah, it's interesting that they didn't require glaives for the bow.
Clearly parity is not
Not a
Strong
requirement.
factor.
Not requirement.
But again, like I don't think they really needed to prop up the value of glaives because shadow
Right.
comps.
right. So I think it is mostly economic based on how the past two have gone.
If
Right.
so, I wouldn't expect Sawir.
No.
I don't know how you pronounce
don't know.
that.
I've
Why is
always said
Sawir? Why does
Sawir.
well-
It's Cyware.
Why
Yeah,
is well?
that's a fair argument. I will accept that will make me expect those seismics and appraisals.
I really hope they don't, but I'm kind of with you. I really
They're
don't
so
want it to be a
useless
forced-
with Ode.
I really don't want it to be a forced group input.
But you just gotta
Yeah.
get good at PVM Zerdones and you can solo Virago.
Good scrub.
What if they add rocks? They add rocks to Virago that I can mine for seismic wands.
Well,
Perfect. No notes.
No notes.
I'm gonna lean on the Virago ones, but I don't know what the other one's gonna be. If I'm being honest, that's
Fair. I do think Praisel might be a step too
much.
far. So yeah,
Yeah, AOD. Yeah.
I think actually, from the side, what about the staff you get from Greater Runic Staff?
Ooh.
Where?
That's
Is that
Runespan,
from
right?
Runespan, or is it Great Orb? I can't remember.
I think it's Runespan.
Oh.
That's
Either
a very
way.
common magic weapon to go to because it's high level and you can AFK it in Runespan.
Right. Interesting. Well, panic by unstable air runes.
Didn't you have some market thing going on, Zerdones, for the ranged or melee one?
Market?
Yeah,
thing?
weren't you doing some market aspect of this? Like some merching at some point?
No, I mean jokingly.
Oh, okay. What if
No,
they
I
just
don't-
keep
I
it
don't
simple and
merch.
do the Nox staff and the seismics?
I would be surprised if they did Nox because they're already using Nox.
Yeah.
How dead is Nox as a component? I guess it's not biting exists.
yeah,
That's the
biting
crazy
exists.
part.
Everybody needs biting.
Yeah, Nox stuff is already crazy elevated.
So
And Scythe is still, I think, I don't know if it's technically best in slot, but it's definitely up there. For
it is
for
one
that
of the
one dynamic
strongest
eruption.
halberd distance weapons you can get. So
It's strongest in raw numbers, but
Yeah.
Lenny's spear is better when you poisonable
so
because it has the passive poison effect.
And I think the thing that we need to realize again with this is that you have Sanctum on one hand, but on the other hand, when you look at what this Masterwork bow, or sorry, not Masterwork bow, the Masterwork staff is going to be, this is going to be a item that competes with the Fractured Staff of Armadyl when it's upgraded. And again, the question is, who needs this? Well, you put it on paper. Would you rather, grind hard mode Carapac for the 3 pieces, or would you rather go through the laborious effort, whatever it's going to be, to make that?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is still just good to have regardless, and that we can be at peace that we have, top tier craftable weapons for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yes. And eventually they'll get some effect. We'll see.
Yeah. And then there's also going to be an expansive pouch. Feedback about this has been generally positive, and with this, they heard the feedback about the size, and they initially mentioned that the minimum would be 44 essence, with the final size to be determined. And they're still working on final balancing. The number that they've settled on is 70. And not only that,
big.
it is the expansive pouch doesn't degrade, meaning you'll be able to free up one of those relic slots once you get your hands on it.
That was a question I definitely had, but from before the last blog was, does it still degrade? ? Glad it doesn't.
Yeah.
This
Feels
almost feels overpowered.
It feels like you end your era with the pouch shenanigans. This is probably like 100 Runecrafting, right? At that point, you don't have to do shenanigans anymore.
Yeah, this is going to be like the 100 or 110 Runecrafting unlock. And it's going to be
say
like
100 just because I think the staff is 110, and I don't think they'd do them at the same spot.
Yeah, that's fair. And I know they also said in the previous blog that this was going to be like a long crafting grind.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with someone about like, well, how grindy is that? I feel like if it's going to be 70 essence and non-degrading, so it makes one of the relics useless.
That's
I feel like
flash
I do
tear.
want this to be a...
It's
Yeah, I feel like
plus
this needs to be a long grind.
more than life and death, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we looking forward to 110 Runecrafting now if we were not?
Already was, but good to have a couple more things to look forward to.
And honestly, I think the thing that is going to be the big shiny object in the room is the time runes and the new spells.
Oh yeah, that's
what everyone's gonna
that is
be focusing
eclipsed.
on, yeah.
So we'll see how that goes, and as all the other 110 launches have gone thus far, hopefully everything will go nice and smoothly. But
Soon PM.
yes, soon. They don't say when, but it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
We're gonna.
What did they say before? Winter?
Yeah.
That was what we were last
Yeah,
told.
so that, I mean, we were kind of extrapolating February,
have
March
time.
there, and I mean, I think there's a world where this is the first update that we get after Runefest.
That's possible.
Maybe. So
That sounds accurate. I don't think it's definitely not before.
no, because
It's not
February is
February.
pretty much spoken for with DXP and combat achievements.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all right, we're going to move on to the patch notes and some other things, but before we do that, I will just take a moment and thank our Patreon supporters for this episode. That is Alvaro L., Amos Reed, Arvidsel, Brayton K., Chilbura, Dominic R., Drama Free, Durham X, Gila Fleur, Hare, Iskatu, Jay Gizmo, Jason S., Jesse W., Keski, Lemon Lodge, Luminos, Mongrath, Mr. T., Pernasius, Ricky A., Robbie D., Runestar, Samuel FL, Scott DS, Shirt Pants, Zioaces, Targayin, The Naked Captain, The Dabbing Goat, Tim, Ukulele Steve, Woody, Zant, and Zazakon. Big, huge thank you, everybody. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Thank you for allowing us to do what we do. And, of course, thank you for making this community what it is. If you want to learn more about that, head on over to patreon.com/RSBNB. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month, and for that you get access to the entire back catalog of 75 plus monthly bits or bonus episodes, as we call them. You also get the opportunity to attend our roundtables when we do them, and to vote in the monthly bit polls, one of which just finished. We'll be talking about Divination early next week that Patreon members will be able to get their hands on. We also have the VIP tier, where for $3 a month you get a Discord chat channel, Discord rank, mentioned on the podcast at the start of the month, and stereo versions of the show each and every week. And for $5 a month, you'll gain access to the clips that we use to make the clip show at the end of the year. And we'll also send you the RSBNB Update Christmas card in December. And if you do want to give the ultimate gift, we do have the experience tier. There's one slot there remaining. You become a premier supporter of RSBNB Update, and you get a shout out at the start of the episode. And you also have the option, if you want, to schedule a live listening session of RSBNB Update as we do the show, and have a bit of a pre-show Q&A with us. Only these people get to do that. They're individual to you. They're not recorded. They're not shared. You can talk about anything you want, ask any questions you want, and we'll be very, very open. And those people also do receive a few times a year a special mail out or digital asset or something to that effect. But patreon.com/RSBNB, it means the world to us. Thanks so much, everybody, and we should have another monthly bid out in the next week or so. So thanks, everyone. I think I'll also say that if you are a Patreon member, go to patreon.com/RSBNB right now and log in and do the survey. We are seeking out our patrons' input for what the Patreon offering should look like in 2025. So if you are a Patreon member, go do the survey. There'll be another call out to it early next week if you missed this one on the show or you haven't done it yet. But we'd greatly appreciate your input if you are a subscriber. Thanks so much, everyone. All right. You guys ready for some patch notes about divination transmuting, oddly enough?
Yeah.
Which
Divination content. That's what we crave.
Do we?
Apparently.
The group Ironman need it.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do. So the way it works is that pieces of the following weapons can now be transmuted into another piece from their respective weapon types. This is the Aldrich Crossbow pieces, the Fractured Staff of Armadillo pieces, the Exakills, and the Bow of the Last Guardian pieces, so that you're not consistently relying on smacking the boss, hoping you're going to get the ones that you need within your group. And there is a substantial cost to this. The Tier 92 weapons require level 92 Divination and 20,000 Incandescent Energy, while the Tier 95 weapons require 95 Divination and 25,000 Incandescent Energy.
Seems fair.
Yeah, it is.
Wait, does that make sense?
What part?
Don't you collect incandescent energy at level 95?
It's 90, isn't it?
Uh,
I thought it
oh,
was
actually, yeah, I think you might be right.
So why would it be on the level 92 one?
Yeah, 95 divination. Interesting.
I feel like it should be the luminous ones that you collect at 90, probably. I just thought of it now. That's
well, because it is for group Iron Man, so you could
you could
yeah,
have the group that would have it.
But then if you have a member who has 95 divination, you can trade the pieces in group storage, right? So why wouldn't you gather the energy and then do the transmutation? Yeah, that's a good point.
weird.
It's a
nitpick.
I'll just accept it as it is. But
yeah.
This will be good for us down the road for when I start supplying the group with Carapac kills, since I'm the only one in the group that likes Carapac.
So I want to run a question because this has been explained to me as a thing that Group Iron Man wants, because for these bosses specifically, the drop mechanics are such that the first one you get is random, and then they always drop in order.
For the player.
Yes. So the way it was explained to me is this is good for Group Iron Man, because if you have two members of your group doing a boss, you can get duplicate pieces, and then that feels bad.
Correct.
My question is, what makes this worse than something like Laniakea's spear? Because the first piece you get is always random. So you have an equal chance of, like, Shane, if you go to Carapac and you get a Fractured Staff orb, and then if Thaxi goes to Carapac, he has an equal chance of either getting a second orb or getting a shaft, which would be a good drop because that's the piece you want. I'm trying to understand what makes this feel worse than something like Laniakea's spear, where all four pieces drop randomly and you have an equal chance of getting any piece. They seem basically equivalent to me.
Yeah,
there's already an expectation from the single player experience of getting them in order, I believe. It's just worse for Group Iron Man.
That's where it kind of lands on with that. And I'm trying to get the exact language because I saw what the exact language was on that, and I knew immediately where you were going on this, and I should have pulled this up before. But I think what it definitely does come down to is what Avernick said in terms of the ordering of the pieces.
But you still... okay.
Because
I guess you do still get that, but you get it with a delay.
You end up with overlapping pieces when multiple players receive drops, as where you start and the order is randomized. So you could potentially, just be missing the symbol, but have the top piece in the shaft for it, in the case of the Fractured Staff. That's my understanding of it.
Yes. And then that's a problem for these bosses where they were designed with the in order in mind.
Yeah. Whereas I think with Laniakea's spear, it's random for everybody, and it's a different case entirely for that, based on where it sits in the whole grand scheme of things. I think.
I also think less people care about the spear.
I don't know. I mean, it is still. I pulled it up as an example, but I think
it's a fair example because I've seen it elsewhere in the community and whatnot this week. So,
I mean the other ones, because I know part of what motivated this question is because I saw a question from someone wondering why they didn't do this to things like Laniakea's spear or the blowpipe.
Yeah.
Or what's the other one? There's another one that drops in pieces randomly. I can't remember what it is now. Anyway,
I don't know.
So I guess it's kind of the same question coming from a different angle, and I guess that kind of answers it. Is it's not so much that the mechanics themselves were bad; it's aligning the expectation.
That's what I would say, but maybe I'm guessing.
Yeah, and you know, I would imagine that if there was other things identified specifically from the group Iron Man lens that could benefit from this, it's something that could probably be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Oh, Inquisitor Staff, that's the other one. But Inquisitor
Right.
Staff also already has a exchange mechanism that was added a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and also imagine you did this for Araxor, for example, you would completely, you know, delegitimize the other paths for the spider, right? So there's definitely things you can't do it for as well.
Yeah.
Also, corrected an issue where Bird's Nest plus seeds could be rolled without having built the Tier 3 Fort 4 and 3 Grove somehow.
And it
something that can just mess up with Eternals.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Players can now exit Coden's story during the Light Within quest on mobile. That was a fun time, I'll tell you that.
So fun.
Resolved an issue causing the visual indicator for Lumberjack's intuition to disappear too quickly. I think we said that this was something that needed to be fixed when we first talked about this content, just because it would be there and then disappear, but you could still, you know, benefit from it a couple of seconds after the fact. So this is good.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Here's a big one. Slayer mass task options are now displayed at the same time as the VIP Slayer ticket option.
That's very interesting.
So if you're wearing your mask, you now get 3 choices of task.
Oh.
I like that.
Yeah.
Players will no longer take damage after teleporting away from the Archglacier boss arena on normal mode, which is a safe death.
Whoops.
Stringing bows with the fletching cleaner will now only use the amount of materials you specify rather than all materials in your backpack. Oops. Could you imagine that?
And there they go.
They're gone. The passing bracelet's first option is now rub instead of wear, and the first action bar option while worn is also rub. So instead of teleporting to the hanging garden as default. And the hope is to make it...
I think was for runecrafting.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah, it says there, yeah.
Exactly. Slightly less annoying to use while runecrafting it. Made some adjustments to various teleports across the game to ensure the players don't receive damage after teleporting away from dangerous situations. That's just good on the whole. Using gem bags while mining no longer interrupts players, so the same mechanic as the ore box.
Yep.
And unequipping the memory dowser, siphoning now stops as intended when it's unequipped. And we didn't address that. We didn't address the Runica tuner in that 110 discussion, did we?
No, we didn't.
Oh, you remember that in the Skilling Offhats monthly bit? Ooh.
I do.
Ugh. Graphical changes, updated the hilltop and the Sylve area to bring it in line with the surrounding areas. Probably something that was just left over. Improved ice cliffs in the wilderness location accessed by the Chaos Altar. The Third Age Druidic Robe Top and Third Age Robe Top should no longer cause female models to break when using walk animation overrides.
Probably good.
Yep. And the hole is now gone east of Ungale Beach.
The people
Which hole was this?
Return the hole.
There.
Must have been just like a missing square or something.
Yeah.
Just a hole.
Not the triumphant return of Dungeoneering hole.
Oh, it
was on vacation.
The long-awaited permanent return.
Yeah, which would be good if it was permanent, because that would mean I could do that for Group Iron Man.
Nope, you gotta wait for the next beach event like everyone else.
But we won't be able to do it because we didn't get XP from any of the Halloween or the Christmas events. So we'll be locked out of that.
Womp womp.
All right. What we promised to deliver this week, the Menethite Pantheon Lore Diggers.
Diggy diggy.
Yep. I have to say with this, is that I hope that people will find this interesting, because I feel like coming in, the Menophyte Pantheon is probably one of the boringest things that people could imagine lore-wise, right?
Way to hype up the segment.
Yeah, you're selling it.
All right, everyone, tune out now. It's over.
No,
I don't know. I
mean, that's why we do Lore Diggers, to expose the interesting things, because I think on the top of it, based on the past Desert Quests, people probably find these guys not that interesting. So we're going to try and make them a bit interesting here.
Yeah, I don't know about I mean, there's definitely a lot of really interesting lore in the Desert Quest, and I think that's what people... I can't remember where I've said this, because we've done a few of these sort of desert episodes, but I feel like the lore is why people care about the Desert Quest, or the Desert series. Because I think, as we've established, it probably isn't the quests.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
See the monthly bit Desert Quest tier list, subscribe to the Patreon, hint, hint, plug.
Okay, so introducing the Desert Pantheon, what we're going to do here is we're going to quickly introduce everybody at hand, talk about where they land and where they were featured, and then get into a bit of a discussion focused around them with their historical recaps, quests they've featured in, where they've been so far, and what could come in the next two quests. So, I'm going to run through these quickly. First up, we have Tumeken, who is the father, who largely just featured in Tumeken's dream, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, Tumeken is a posthumous character at this point.
Yeah. And Tumeken's dream wasn't even in game, I don't think. I think that was just like a
lore history.
I think
lore history post.
There's a version of it that I think is in the game, although I can't remember where.
As in the Menaphos library?
It's either in the Menaphos library, or it's a conversation you can have with some minor character in Sophanum, like Jex.
Okay. Fair enough. Then, of course, we have Elidinis, the mother, Spirits of the Elid, Ode of the Devourer, features, of course, in Gate of Elidinis, Skilling Boss.
Also, not really there, but that's where we learn about her, yes.
Yeah, where we learn about her. And I just wanted to put that out there, that this isn't necessarily where these people feature, it's just where we learn about them at this point. Next up, Apmeken. We had a fun thing at the start of the show describing what Apmeken was, and we settled on the goddess of mischief and friendship, thanks to Avernick.
Do you want to tell them what phrase you found from the wiki page to put there first?
Yeah, I put on the wiki page the goddess of social pleasures, because that's what the wiki describes Apmeken as.
Goddess of Amsterdam.
Someone should take a look at that.
Features in Tumeken's dream and Do No Evil. Obviously, Apmeken related to the monkeys and the monkey colony in Do No Evil.
Weirdly not related to Marimbo, so we have two monkey gods, two ape gods.
I've never seen them in the same room together.
That would be I would watch that. I would watch that. Put that on pay-per-view. I'll call up Vince. I think he'd be all for it.
Crondis, the goddess of modesty, diligence, and resourcefulness. Tumeken's dream and crocodile tears. So you're sensing the general trend here is that there was stuff in the Menaphos series that touched on a lot of these characters, and that's why we're wanting to do these lore diggers, is provide a bit of a rundown of these characters and see, well, maybe Crondis, maybe Apmeken will be back at some point. Next is the god of health, Het. Features in Tumeken's Dream, Our Man in the North, and Eye of Het, parts 1 and part 2, which obviously in game we have Het's Oasis, the replacement of the duel arena there.
He ekes out in representation because gambling bad.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically.
Health, both physical and mental, as the description. So there you go, because gambling definitely leans into one of those.
Het solved the duel arena.
Yeah, he established the duel arena as to promote physical health, and then he saw how it was corrupted, and he cleansed it. Het delivered us.
That's the head canon. That's the canon now.
Praise him.
The het cannon in your head, you could
The
say.
het cannon.
Load the head
Sorry.
cannons.
No, don't apologize for greatness.
Scabaras, god of isolation and wisdom, features in Tumeken's Dream and our most recent quest beneath Scabaras Sands.
Weirdly, he's also featured. I should have put this in the notes before we started, but we also learn a lot about him in dealing with Scabaras and to a certain extent in Contact.
The other one with his name.
It's weird because Scabaras is one of the ones that we get the most about. He's definitely of the minor gods. He's the one we deal the most with.
Yeah, in terms of the in terms of looking at the lesser members of the Pantheon, right?
And like compared, he's kind of comparable to Icthlarin and Amascut in terms of how much we learn about him, even if we don't interact with him directly. Like we deal with his followers a lot.
Yeah. And on that, Icthlarin, also God of the Dead and the Family Dog.
He's in a lot.
Goodest of boys.
Lots of quests, of course. Icthlarin's Little Helper, Missing Presumed Death, Nomad's Elegy, Sliske's Endgame, City of Sentistan, I Have Had Part 1 and 2, Ode of the Devourer, and lots more. Pretty much anything that touches the Sixth Age, Necromancy, and the Elder God Wars, Icthlarin was on the edge of.
Yeah.
And then we have... go ahead.
The goodest of boys.
I was going to say, oddly, a lot of the content is not about his relationship to the desert.
No, it's not.
Really
Forget that.
to the underworld, yeah.
People just like him because he's a bro. He's a good boy. He's a good dude. Yeah, he's the goodest boy.
And then we have Amascut, the goddess of destruction and the family house cat. Features in Diamond at the Rough.
Goddess of rebirth.
Yeah, theoretically. Icthlarin's Little Helper, Smoking Kills, Fight Club, Ode of the Devourer, and Beneath Scabaras Sand. And that is the Menethite Desert Pantheon. And what I've done for this is I felt this was a good thing to have on hand here. I did up a little family tree graphic here. And the way it goes is that the only quote-unquote children of Tumeken and Elidinis are actually Icthlarin and Amascut in the way it's set up. And Zerdones, you had a good way of describing how Tumeken created the four minor gods.
Well, the lore that we have from Ode of the Devourer is that Tumeken and Elidinis pooled their resources to uplift Icthlarin and Amascut. So that's why they're the children of both of them. And then the minor gods, this is the lore that it's been alluded to in other things like Tumeken's Dream, but it was kind of firmly established in Beneath Scabaras' Sands that Tumeken alone took a little piece of his power and used it to uplift the minor gods. So that's why they're only under him. And then I guess Elidinis is stepmom.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think.
Am I crazy in saying that there was once an interpretation, I don't know if this was in game or not, where it was debated whether the aspects were created at Tumeken's death? I feel like we're definitely not there anymore, but I feel like... Am I misremembering something? Or was it always definitely before?
I can't say one way or the other.
Okay, I might be misremembering something then. Obviously always of Tumeken, but...
No, they definitely would have had to have been before because there's statues of them in the tomb of... And I'm stalling because I'm blaying on the name. Senlitin, thank you. The tomb of Senlitin. And she definitely died before Tumeken explode.
Explode, yes. Okay, so then
that's a good way of putting it.
And the fool.
No, that's fine. And it really does, I think, beg the question, why, and I'm speaking here from, the Jagex creative stance is, in terms of when the Desert Quest line was starting out, why do we have these four characters on the side here? the four aspects, let's call them Crondis, Apmeken, Het, and Scabaras. They seem like those were just created for the sake of quests at one point in time, and now we're just kind of trying to figure out where exactly they land in the grand scheme of things. And then Icthlarin rose to fame in the Sixth Age and Elder God Wars, and Amascut, of course, people wanted her because of, everything that Old School has done with Amascut.
I can think of two reasons why you would have wanted these characters in. The first is just because the first is because having background details is very important for storytelling in an MMO, because the thing about an MMO is that conceptually, theoretically, this game will last forever. And so the story needs to last forever, which means we need to constantly be adding new story elements, and we need to be extending the story. If as creators, Jagex seeds ideas that they don't actually develop yet, that gives them something that they can pull on down the road.
Right.
So they're not just pulling new story ideas out of nowhere.
Right. So you basically have 4 threads you can work with those ones.
Yeah.
Right. Mazcab is an example of this done poorly, where Mazcab just came out of nowhere. Mazcab literally fell out of the sky.
Yep.
Whereas this stuff, we've seeded the minor gods back in 2002.
Yeah.
And so now we can pull from them in 2025, and that feels natural. The second reason I think you would do them is because the Desert Pantheon clearly takes a lot of inspiration from Egyptian mythology.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people know about Egyptian mythology is there are a lot of Egyptian gods. And so, a polytheistic pantheon doesn't really land the same if you only have, 3 gods.
Right, and then just like that same Egyptian mythology, there are ones that are more heavily focused on, and there are ones that are just kind of left to sit on the side a bit.
And there are some that are more regional, in ancient Egypt, the different gods had various places in Egypt where they were more or less worshipped. Sobek, for instance, had a whole city devoted to worshipping Sobek, the ancient Egyptian crocodile god. And so you see something similar to that in the desert, in the Menify Pantheon, where, Sophanum is Icthlarin's place. Menephos is more Tumeken. Het is Al-Kharid, obviously. Elidinis is Narda.
Narda, yeah.
And then the monkey colony Apmeken.
Monkey colony Apmeken. So you get that kind of regionalization, which also fits in really well.
Okay. And, with that, I think that's probably a good jumping off point to, if we were just to, say, we have these 2 final quests coming up, of the ones that we have just listed, of those, which ones do you think would need the most fleshing out to appear in those 2 quests, or maybe which would be the most interesting to talk about on those? And this is just a kind of a rough question before we go into the big discussions.
Maybe not to appear, but I think the one that needs the most attention to really bring the story home is Tumeken. I feel like we don't know quite enough, and his relationship with Amascut is clearly driving
Very
the
important.
plot.
Yeah,
I think we need to get to the climax of that.
I would agree.
Yeah, because isn't our boss encounter called the Amascut Showdown or something like that?
Yes, and from the last quest, we know that she's trying to create an echo of him to devour. So
yeah,
okay.
And we have an interaction between them, sort of, at the end of Fight Club. So there's definitely a lot of foreshadowing for Tumeken being important.
All right.
What of this list he needs it?
What about any of the minor ones, like Apmeken, Crondis, Het, and obviously Scabaras? We just had the Scabaras quest for all intents and purposes, so I won't say.
Yeah,
too
I think
much
it's fair that Scabaras is probably going to be pretty important.
Yeah,
I think they're going to be important. I don't know if they're going to get more fleshing out. They'll be there, but I don't think we're going to learn revelatory things.
No, and I don't think we need to on Het. For example, I think we're good for Het. We're probably good for Apmeken, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah, we've gotten the Crocodile Tears and
Yeah.
Do No Evil and whatnot, the Spotlight quests.
I feel like it may overload the quest, but I do kind of feel like I hope they all come back, just because the way, I mean, the Desert series is a little bit of a mess plot wise, because there's a lot of threads going on all at once. But in terms of sort of the main what is Amascut doing plot thread, the way that's kind of structured has been like Amascut does schemes, we then branch out and we interact with all the minor gods, and then those all get tied together at the end where we deal with Amascut's schemes. So we've had quests for 3 of the 4 minor gods where we fixed whatever Amascut did to them. We seem to be moving towards a follow-up quest where we deal with whatever she wants to do to Scabaras. So, like, it would be very narratively satisfying to then, now that we've fixed all of their problems, we bring the whole family back together and deal with mean Big Sister.
There is one graphical requirement for that scene, though. We need a different Crondis model.
yeah, which we don't have too much of right now when you consider.
They just made a corrupted form for her, yeah.
I mean, I think we need a new Apmeken model more, but yeah.
Because
at least
Apmeken
is still.
I mean, the Crondis
Apmeken
model
is showing her age a bit.
is like a half-human crocodile
basically the
appearance thing.
Like, you can't have that Crondis appear in most other places.
Yeah, well, it definitely
Hey, if you look
needs
at
to
the
be re-rigged. But
if you look
Also
at
have a human-like model for her.
I was going to say, if you look at the Crondis wiki page, there is concept art from Menifo showing Crondis in a palace bath.
That is the actual.
Yeah.
That's what she
So-
is right now.
Yeah.
yeah, that's the idea for.
So
how
the
they
question
develop
is that the
her.
model, or is it the one that's
No. So right now we have the huge model where she was gluttonous, but I think that
Okay.
we need to tone it down to
that's a
something
good
that
way
can
of putting it?
walk. Well, she was supposed to be resourceful and like not take too much and whatever, and so her corruption was going overboard.
Right. The whole point of her corruption is excess.
And then you see why you say, Zerdones, we could use a new Apmeken model.
Yeah, that one's
Well, that
showing,
was just old,
showing
yeah.
her age a bit. She needs a
Old
facelift. Needs a spa day.
All right.
That's fair. We all need to take a day for ourselves.
So
sometimes.
what we're going to do for each of the ones that we have just run through is we're going to do talk about the quest they featured in, the role in the series so far, what we learned in the featured quests, and potentially talk about what could come from the next 2 quests. So starting with Tumeken, and I think it's good that you mentioned this, Zerdones, that we need to weave Tumeken in here somehow, because basically all we got is that lore's in history and maybe whatever's in the Menifos library about this, but it was very clear from beneath Scabaras Sands that there is some sort of hijinks going on with Amascut inside that temple and trying to raise some aspect of Tumeken for probably a nefarious purpose, I would say.
Yeah, well, let's back up a little bit, because Tumeken is a posthumous character. Tumeken is, at least theoretically, dead. So we actually know quite a bit about Tumeken from before the start of the game, where he was one of the first gods on Gilinar. He was the patron deity of basically the entire desert civilization, although it wasn't a desert at the time. It was lush and verdant and green. Then Zaros came in, and as he always does, sucked, made everything worse, went to war with Tumeken and the Menophites. And so Tumeken basically sent his kids out to recruit warriors from another dimension. They came back with the Majorat, who eventually had kind of a civil war between them. A whole bunch went over to Zaros. Tumeken resolved this dilemma by blowing himself up.
Mm-hmm.
and thus kind of created every problem the desert has had to deal with ever since.
Yes.
So it's fair to say then with that everything desert is Majorat adjacent.
They're
well,
intimately tied to the history of the desert in a way that, to the extent that it's kind of weird that they're actually not more involved in the Desert series quests, or like even mentioned more.
Hey, there's nothing that says in the last two they couldn't turn up.
It's true.
They've only started to be mentioned more in the quests we've gotten recently. I feel like.
Could that be the tie-in to the undead stuff with Zemregal?
That was the tie-in, no?
I mean, they used that to kind of tie the fort storyline into the desert storyline.
Yeah, but beyond that, I mean, could there be more?
They could. I think the fear would be overloading with characters.
There's already so much, yes.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
So after he exploded and basically turned the desert into the desert, and also created the light Amascut mining spot over by the bandits' lodestone. The only other thing of Tumeken that we really have is the Carrot Ib, which is
right.
It
seems to contain some consciousness.
Yeah, there is some element of Tumeken that is within that, and we don't quite know what exactly that is.
Was that not something that was said at the end of Beneath Scabaras Sands?
I don't remember it. I mean, it would make sense if it was. It would make sense if it was like the same kind of thing that he used to uplift the minor gods. So it's like a shard of his power.
Scabaras calls the Carrot Ib Tumeken's heart. That's it. Not so much.
Yeah, that was because that was what they called it in the Ozan double bill quests.
You are right.
That's like its flowery name.
I wonder with all this, it's possible that this plays a role in the upcoming quest, isn't it? The Carrot Ib.
Very likely.
That's the MacGuffin, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the immediate MacGuffin would be Scabaras' light.
Yeah, the Carrot Ib is the MacGuffin of the Al-Kharid quests, which replaced the Prince Ali rescue, and to a certain extent also the Menaphos quests.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because Fight Club ends with Amascut in the Soul Altar doing something to the Carrot Ib, because she's now stolen it. And Tumeken, or something of Tumeken, speaks to her through the Carrot Ib, through Ambassador Jabari. But
yeah, and that's why I think when we go back and we look at Beneath Scabaras' Sands and Ode to the Devourer, the thing that got the desert quest line going again. That's why you couldn't just jump straight in from Fight Club, I think, because I remember, when Menaphos came out and we had Fight Club, and it looked like there was going to be something going on there, but we didn't necessarily know at the time when we were looking at that about what that would be. And I mean, it's fair to say that that's the next logical step of the desert storyline as one aspect of it. But I feel like we also got a whole collection of other information in Beneath Scabaras' Sands that has an impact too, in terms of where we could go.
A lot to do.
So, maybe, if anything, the Carrot Ib is our vessel to learn more about Tumeken.
Probably to an extent.
To an extent, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we had some kind of interaction with Tumeken. Maybe on the level of, like, Fate of the God Zaros type thing.
Oh, kind of like a in our mind sort of thing, maybe?
Far?
Yeah, interacting with Guthix in The World Wakes.
Okay.
Where we just have a conversation with some remnant of him. Mm. I don't think they'll go so far as to resurrect him.
No,
but I wouldn't be surprised if we had some conversation with him.
And the thing is, I don't necessarily know, like if I know they deprecated the whole godhood tier list thing, right? And compared to Saradomin, Zamorak, Armadil, Bandos, Tumeken would have been lower on that godhood tier power.
No, greater.
Greater.
Definitely greater.
Yeah, Tumeken.
Okay.
He was making gods.
Yeah. Yeah, Tumeken was dad god.
I think he probably would have been like just below Gothics.
My headcanon theory is that Tumeken is the same kind of thing as Saren and Zaros.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now that's interesting. And then
like
what's
innately divine?
Right, and then what would Tumeken's creator have been then? Because we know what the creator of Saren and Zaros was, or Saren and Zaros was.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
that
an
poses an
interesting
interesting question, doesn't it?
Well, especially since I don't think we know a lot about exactly how the Majorat were found. But here's an interesting theory. What if Tumeken is the older brother of Saren and Zaros? Ma made him first. He left. May not even have known that Saren and Zaros existed. But when Zaros came in and things started going against him, he was like, oh, this seems familiar. Kids, go to this place, which I'm not going to tell you is my hometown. You'll find something there that will help us.
That would definitely be an interesting way to kind of go back in on the kind of storytelling that people have been asking for post God Wars. If something like that panned out to be true.
I don't think it would turn out to be a major element, but it wouldn't surprise.
It would be enough that people like you would theory craft off it and be confirmed or denied, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be a bone to the lore nerds.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So. Okay. So there is a lot to learn about Tumeken still, and the point is, we don't know much right now. We just have Tumeken's Dream. We just have the Caradib, and I don't think we have much else, do we?
We have the ancient history, and then we do have the characterization, the takes on Tumeken of characters we know, like Amascut and Icthlarin.
Yeah.
Like, we know he was stern.
Kind of not a great dad.
Not bad dad.
Not good dad.
He had great expectations.
On a scale from Carapac to Hannibus. Yeah, he's definitely more Carapac than Hannibus.
Right, or at least if we were to believe Amascut and what looks like from Icthlarin denial.
And also kind of Scabaras a little bit. I mean, Scabaras is way more chill because he's kind of achieved enlightenment, but he's kind of not blind to the fact that...
And when you put this entire discussion we've just had over the last 10 minutes or so in the lens of whatever Amascut was up to in Beneath Scabaras' Sand, you can kind of see that, maybe Jagex, if Tumeken is indeed on the level of Zaros and Saren and same sort of headcanon in your Caesardones, that's the perfect way of addressing that kind of story in this day and age without having powerful entities like that running around.
Yeah, so we can kind of deal with that posthumously.
Yeah. Let's move on to Elidinis then, in terms of everything that we've got so far in all of the quests, all of the content to this date here. Spirits of the Elid, which is an ancient quest, and Ode of the Devourer, interestingly.
Very not ancient quest.
So two, polar opposite ends here on this. And I want to say that Spirits of the Elid was 2005. I just looked it up. I was going to say 2002, but it was 2005.
It didn't say much, and what it did say doesn't seem to be too relevant.
No, and it's just the basic, kind of is setting the idea of mother, rebirth, water kind of business, I say.
Elidinis is interesting because I think before the most recent crop of quests, she was the one we knew the least about.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically all we knew was she was Tumeken's wife, and she had an association with water, and then she left.
And she was Icthlarin and Amascut's mom,
Yeah, Icthlarin and Amascut's mom, and then she left. So what we know now is that I don't remember. This is in one of the lore books. I don't remember if this is confirmed history or if this is
Mythologized, yeah.
It's mythologized. So the story we've been told then is that Elidinis was a human, a Menethite living in Narda, who Tumeken uplifted into a god.
I'm sorry, I have the book pulled up here. It seems more like she came across a source of power.
Oh, okay.
And then at the end of the book, it says many years later, the god Tumeken arrived and encountered Elidinis. So some sort of moonstone thingy.
Right. A turning point in her life came in the Second Age when she was drawn to a mysterious song to a secluded grove in the woods. There she found a radiant shard of pure moonlight.
Okay.
So Wikipedia paraphrasing.
Yeah, that's from the RuneScape Wiki Second Age.
Similar language in the transcripts.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Eventually, the sun god met Tumeken, and their union by the river Elid symbolized the balance of moon, sun, water, and fire.
Right. Okay. So I'm misremembering. She's a young god on like Saradomin. She found a thing and that made her god.
Yes.
Okay.
And then going on from the other things we learned from Ode, is she left after Tumeken exploded. That's most of it.
Yeah, her husband blew up. She had kind of a hard time dealing with that, and so she left. Which, I mean, fair.
Yep.
Like, that's never happened to me, but I feel like I'd probably need a minute.
I mean, she left her kids behind. That seems to do some trauma.
Yeah, but you know how the modern quest love dealing with those kind of family issues.
That's the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, I mean, daddy issues quests are so passé. We need some mommy issues quests.
Oh boy. Well, I think we already have what we need on Elidinis, so I don't think we need to necessarily worry about that.
You scared him off the topic.
I think the only other real thing we have about Elidinis was there's a lore book in the Menethos library, which paints her, which paints her in not exactly a negative light, but definitely a very harsh light, where she comes across this race of spider monsters who she finds out that they're kind of a little bit totally not evil, and so she wipes them out. I'm simplifying, obviously, but that's the gist.
It's a long book.
It's a pretty long book, as these books go. So, like, she's got a kind of a mean streak in her, and that's been maybe not mean, ruthless. Let's say ruthless streak.
Good word.
And I think story-wise, with what we have on Elidinis, we are at a point where we have the Gate of Elidinis skilling boss, and I know I'm saying it differently each and every time. That's just the way it's rolling off the tongue. Forgive me on that. And the whole thing, wasn't it, that the gate was the protection of the sanctum of rebirth? Yes.
The gate was what was doing.
Not the protection. It was the mechanism.
Okay, so the gate, right? Because then gate came after Sanctum of Rebirth content that we got in the summer. Yeah. And I think if you're teeing this up in terms of setting up the desert and looking at where things go, you've done your bit for Elidinis, and you're probably good at this point. So I don't necessarily know if we're going to have too much Elidinis featuring in the final two quests of the series.
Well, the interesting thing about her is that, unlike Tumeken, she is still alive, as far as we know.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say they are going to do this, but I feel like one way they could take the story is, because Amascut's core problem right now is very essentialized. She's mad at Tumeken. She's angry at her dad, and she's lashing out. So one way you could, since Tumeken is dead, you can't resolve that, really. I mean, you kind of can, because there is an element of his consciousness around. But he's dead. That anger has nowhere to go. one way you could deal with that is bring Elidinis back in to basically deal with her daughter and be like, look, it's okay. We'll figure it out together. You and I will heal this damage. I'm not going to say they will do that. Not in the least, because like healing the damage makes it kind of weird to have a boss fight. But that's a thing that they could do.
I don't know how that would bounce off the community.
I think the players would hate it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to talk about why, because it would make me angry.
I don't necessarily have the brain power to follow that through. I don't know where you're going with that.
We'll let it be a mystery.
We'll let that be a mystery.
mystery.
Yeah, we can talk about it in post show and maybe make it into a clip.
Okay, dokie. But yeah, those were the featured quests. Big story, Ode of the Devourer, the skilling boss. Anything else on Elidinis?
No?
I've talked a lot.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. You had a good theory on it.
I have to do the monkey then?
Yeah, do the monkey, Avernet.
Reject human.
All right, Apmeken.
Apmeken. I feel like the Desert series. So Apmeken was, of course, mostly in Do No Evil.
Yeah,
I feel like the Desert
that's a big
series,
one.
up until Do No Evil, was kind of puttering around, and when we did Do No Evil, we were like, okay, we're actually fleshing out these aspects.
Yeah.
So in Do No Evil, we know before that Apmeken is been corrupted by Amascut, and I don't know if it was in Do No Evil. We learned that it was by taking all of her senses. It's kind of how the corruption manifested.
That sounds
I think
familiar.
it was in Do No Evil, because that was the boss fight.
Yeah.
Right, and that was also then what we attributed to why the three wise monkeys are each like the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. So in this quest, we learn about her. It's a very long quest. I feel like we very slowly heal all the senses, and then we find that the senses that were stolen were turned into the bosses for this quest. So one of them is the stolen speech, one of them is the stolen sight, one of them is the stolen hearing. All very scattered about. And then we do restore Apmeken. We learn a bit about like the history from Senlatin, about the times when like you said, it wasn't a desert. Like in the past, it was like a jungle, and there were monkeys and stuff like that, and the monkeys would play with Senlatin. But we do manage to restore Apmeken, and I feel like, other than her personality is kind of like a little humorous, that's kind of mostly what we know is just how she was corrupted and how we fix it. I don't think we have much more than that.
Yeah, she basically just kind of pops in at the end and says, "Hey, thanks."
Yeah.
And I think that even leads to a joke where the monkeys don't know we're talking to her.
I was about to say, was this the first time this joke appeared, where it's like only we can see the aspects sometimes? Because this joke happens again in Our Man in the North.
Yeah, it must have been then, because Do No Evil was long preceded.
I can't think of a time before that the joke happened.
And that's interesting, because why just us? Why just us?
And just with Apmeken and Het, I think Crondis and Scabaras are easily seeable.
Well, yeah, because Crondis has a whole attendant.
Right. That's an interesting thought.
They may have the power to choose to appear
possibly
to us.
One notable thing of Apmeken and actually Het and we'll get to Het and Crondis as well, is that even though we learn beneath Scabaras Sands, even though we've cleansed the corruption that Amascut placed in them, Amascut still managed to get from them the piece of Tumeken she needed. So, like, we fixed the person, we haven't fixed the problem.
Right.
And, I think that is an important thing to remember for all this, is that a lot of the times when we were doing these quests, because Do No Evil was 2010, so this is before the Sixth Age, this was advancing the story, I think, in a way that it wasn't immediately clear to the people at Jagex how big the RuneScape universe inside Gielinor would expand, if that makes sense, in relation to the gods. So you wind up with this storyline, and I remember doing this quest, and I was thinking at the time that, is this going to be effectively something that's going to tie in the desert and the monkey storyline from Monkey Madness? And obviously not the case. Not the case.
Well, it does a little bit.
It does a bit, but not. It's just coming a little bit close, and then we're zooming back off after that, I think.
It ties them together lore-wise, but not in a way that really matters.
Not plot, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that also, like, at this time, I would put money on the direction of the series was we were going to slowly uncorrupt the aspects, and, like, that was going to lead to now we've depowered Amascut, or we were going to chip away at it. But I think they quickly, maybe not quickly, maybe it was recently, who knows, realized that leads to a sputter of an ending, and in order to get the climactic ending, we does have to be kind of retconned. Oh, you didn't actually stop Amascut stuff with Apmeken. She got what she needed anyway.
Yeah, she's still a threat.
A little bit of, I would call it a retcon, even though it was just unspecified, but the trajectory of the series at the time made it seem like more of a win than it actually was.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a win because there were negative consequences to the gods being corrupted. It was most notable with Crondis.
Regional, local, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the evil one started with like any sort of like inciting incident, whereas like the crocodile tears did start with like, oh, the crocodiles are being aggressive.
Yeah, I think Do No Evil
might have just been like
how Do No Evil started.
It starts with Senlatin just being like, let's fix this.
Right. Yeah, Senlatin's like, there used to be monkeys. I miss monkeys. I'm a queen. Go fetch me monkeys.
And then we go to recruit the 3 wise monkeys, yeah. And bringing them back might have been what like spurned on Apmeken appearing and then us finding the census.
Also,
yes, right, I remember
in terms of minor members of the Pantheon, this has to have the biggest web of quest requirements on it. I tell you right now, go to the wiki page and look up the quest requirements for Do No Evil.
Huge master quest.
Yeah, it's big.
That one set the bar way too high for what these quests were maybe supposed to be.
Right, and you would think that, they're going to do one for each member of the Pantheon like this.
Of that level? No, that
didn't happen.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Speaking of, are we good to move on to Crondis?
Yeah, let's move on to Crondis. The biggest one there, I think, was Crocodile Tears, in addition to the lore in Tumeken's Dream.
Oh, yeah. I think for these 4 aspects, it's largely contained to a spotlight quest. Crocodile Tears, of course, being a Menaphos quest released with Menaphos. So I guess it doesn't have reputation anymore, so it's really tying it there.
Crocodile Tears was my favorite Menaphos quest.
I probably agree.
I also agree, but I don't see that as a compliment.
See, again, quest tier list, Desert Quest tier list on Patreon.
Yeah. What I do like about it is it's the first one where, like, it's the first spotlight quest on the Desert God or the Minor Pantheon where it actually feels like a spotlight. Because, like, Do No Evil, the whole thing, it's really focused on the monkeys, and Apmeken is almost an afterthought. And then we'll talk about Head, but spoilers.
Also
similar.
Yeah, so in this quest, like I said, it starts with the crocodiles are too aggressive. So similar strategy. We talked to Senlatin. She's like, we're going to fix this other god. Kind of in a weird way. Something about this quest kind of like rubs me the wrong way. It's framed like a parody of Do No Evil, where you're asked to do all these tasks. But the way the requirements sit, I feel like you'd almost always play this quest first. Yeah. So you're doing a parody of something you haven't played before.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But in this quest, we pretty quickly locate Crondis by doing one of the many scour the desert with an item that kind of points in a direction, dowsing rod. And then we find Crondis, and we learn that the corruption that has been beset upon her is that where she is supposed to be resourceful and modest and maybe a little demure, she is instead gluttonous and demanding and a jerk.
Kind of a prima donna.
And then we go on a series of tasks getting her slowly increasing requests. Each one requires double the quantity of the one before, until we get to the request that requires more spaces than exist in our inventory. And because we can't do that, we yell back, and then she throws up her corruption as a boss fight, which is a big crocodile dude.
We went through a weird... It's not exactly a phase, because I think they were separated by several years, but there's a few quests that are just really fixated on vomit.
What was that patch note a few weeks back
Catcher.
about that? Yeah, that was it. Imp Catcher.
That one's all vomit all the time.
Let Them Eat Pie
Yeah.
is the other one.
Is that all of them?
There might be more. I know who...
Well, I mean, that was 2010. That was like the edgelord phase for a lot of people, wasn't it?
Well,
The
Let Them Eat
2010s.
Pie was Maud Wilson, and Maud Wilson was just kind of an odd
I was
duck.
about to say, there might be some more in the Pirate series somewhere.
There could be. I don't know if Wilson was on this. I don't think so. I think he
No,
was
Wilson was gone by this, I believe.
He was gone by now? Okay.
Yeah, 2017. Pretty sure he left with Heroes Welcome.
Yeah, that could be.
Might be pulling that in my ass. Anyway, so yes, we defeat the corruption, and much like Apmeken, things go back to normal afterwards, and then we later learned on the Scabaras Sands, even though we fixed the corruption, Amascut still got the Tumeken light bit from Crondis as well.
We did fix desert heat, so that's something.
And then the reward of making the water skins and enchanted water tiara useless. Yeah.
So
Yep.
I want to bring this back to Crondis because, going over that quest again and how we were, played the fool of kind of is rubbing me the wrong way. What I'm wondering about this is that we're done with Crondis, right? I don't think there's any, aside from the corruption bit, probably. That's probably all we have in the upcoming quests, right?
For Apmeken, Crondis, and Het, the biggest return I'm imagining in my head, maybe I'm crazy, is going to be like everyone, they all appear at some moment to help collectively shoot a power beam in a Amascut or something. I don't think that they're characters. I think that at this point,
some element of them.
Their power, yes.
Imagine the ending of Avengers Endgame. It's going to be us against Amascut, and then a whole bunch of portals will open behind us, and the Metaphite gods will pour out, and they will help us fight Amascut.
I don't think there's much more character stuff.
I have to say, as both a quester and a PVMer, that's not very compelling.
No?
I don't think so, no.
It's compelling narratively. I think it'll be kind of tough
sure.
to do in the engine.
What if you had the 4 of them in your back row and you could activate an ability for each one at certain times during the fight?
Don't. I'd say don't put that in my PVM. That has proven that can't really be executed that well.
Okay.
What if we do the Mother Malum fight, but with
what if we drop
gods?
Crondis on a Amascut?
Oh boy!
I love it.
Now that's kind of stretching it, isn't it? But I mean, with everything we have so far, you can see how maybe that kind of lands in that realm.
Not really, but still ship it.
Yeah.
Jagex, take notes.
And that's what you get when you have the glutinous crocodile.
Glutinous crocodile.
Glutinous with much gluten.
Very sticky, very bad if you have celiac disease.
You know what I mean.
Yes. I guess these are feeling a little short, but I think we're going to...
No, that's fine, because that's really all there is for each of the Pantheon members. That's fine. It's not like...
we have a little bit more.
It's not like we're gonna have an entire, this is Zaros discussion on this, so by all means, Het.
This is Het, featured in Our Men in the North. A quest not really about Het until you accidentally cure his corruption at the end.
Yeah.
which is amusing that it seems that Osmond's schemes was really keeping him down. And once we unveil those, he's able to appear again, like Apmeken, only to us. So the dual arena surgeon and nurse or whatnot are thinking we're crazy, hit our head. But Het, God of Health, not much going on during the spotlight quest. He does say at the end that he's going to go check out the plague situation in Stoffanem. We have no follow up to that at this point in time,
which is unfortunate. I think
plague is still a thing
because you could have wiped that out like you wiped out the West Ardoyan one when we found out what that was.
Yeah, I have a feeling that just every Menethos
is that
quest
something that needs to be?
Deadline.
Is the plague in Sophanim something that needs to be resolved in the Desert Quest series?
I feel like at any point now they could just, if they had the ability in time to make like a model swap at a certain point in time, they could just do it and say, "Oh, he did it."
Are the plague locusts a Slayer creature?
They might be. I don't think they're a Slayer creature, but they are a city quest assignment.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, they're not gonna. I don't think they're gonna fix it. It'd be nice if they could at least like take the sores off of the models' faces. That would be all right.
Mm.
They're not gonna get rid of a monster if it's tied into other content. I struggle to imagine.
There is a little more on Het from Eye of Het 1 and 2. Luckily, he gets a little extra content because the dual arena had to go. He has the much better area dedicated to him.
Am I imagining it, or was Eye of Het a passion project for Het's Oasis?
No, I think it was an attempt to tie in a demand to get rid of the dual arena into the
Elder God War
the main story that was going on.
Right, okay.
Also, it was trying to integrate a demand to have event content, so they made event content that turned into quests.
Yeah, and I mean, content-wise, Het's Oasis is wonderful for Hunter, wonderful for agility, and wonderful for farming if you have nothing else to do for that. That's how I got top 60 for Fresh Start Worlds in farming. But looking at Het in Eye of Het Part 1 and Part 2, I feel like going back to that, and this is relatively recent history that I'm actually able to remember what we talked about here on these episodes. I feel like when we had Eye of Het Part 1 and Part 2, we actually had a decent discussion in terms of everything that resulted from it. And well, yes, it was 6th Age coming off of the Elder God Wars kind of stuff, moving into the finale of that. I think that at the end of it, what that provided for Het and the lore around Het's Oasis was something that kind of stood out and makes us think that maybe had that been part of the Desert Quest line, maybe that would have been something that might have been a bit more better received. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think there's two interesting things about Het here. One is a kerfuffle, but the main interesting thing, I guess, would be the actual artifact itself, the Eye of Het, which Icthlarin tells us is a portion of Het's power turned into an artifact that can do necromancy that's not really necromancy. It can return people to life, which apparently, but in a way that's not considered necromancy, which is then also a way that's not our necromancy is considered necromancy. It's very weird. Like if this is the period of time where it's like
hand waving.
This is the period of time where it's like there's really no way they're doing necromancy as the skill because they made this ridiculous explanation for an artifact. Call it ethical, right?
I mean, I think
got the skill.
I think it makes sense within the context of the Desert Pantheon because like death and rebirth are kind of built into the lore.
Right, but then we also get the Gate of Elidinis, so like this is just a different way of doing rebirth that apparently also like this could have been replacing Amascut's job. It's kind of like all over the place. Like
that's where I was going with that. It's like it makes sense in the context of the Pantheon as a whole. Why is it Het's thing?
Right. And why was this not a solution this whole time for like our goddess of rebirth has not stopped rebirthing.
Yeah.
It's weird, but that is not as weird as the little line that we had for, I think, only a couple of weeks.
That was... Yeah.
Where there were more than one het, and then I think the implication was then there was also more than one of every...
Where did it say there was more than one het?
There was a line where...
It's from Icthlarin. At the beginning, where it's explaining where we are.
I don't remember exactly what it was, but yeah.
It was like saying that, like, the current het or whatnot.
Right.
And implying there was a previous het, and this is from out of game JMod speak. This was apparently an attempt to correct a perceived issue where they thought that players were going to look at the room called Het's Tomb, which all of those little rooms that have like a mask and an item in them that you can go into post-quest are called blank tomb, like Scabaras' tomb, Apmeken's tomb. We were going to Het's Tomb to get the Eye of Het, and if it's called Het's Tomb, that means a Het died. But we still have the god Het. So the idea was that there was a person named Het who died and was so great that Tumeken based the aspect off of the dead person. And then because we had the other tombs, I guess the implication would also be there were like the other aspects were based off of dead things. This was perceived by the community immediately to be way too ridiculous, complicated, unnecessary. No one cared it was called the tomb when you click on it or whatever. And so they just got rid of the lines. Just one Het now. But it's still called a tomb.
It was a very strange couple of weeks of lore.
I just want to underscore again for people listening to this here in 2025. There is one Het.
There is one Het as of now.
The one true Het.
But it was retconned. There were two.
It was retcon, and then it was retcon.
It was the retcon was retconned.
And see, the simplest solution to this issue, like let's say you believe that the whole Tomb of Het thing is actually an issue, I have a really easy solution. It's now the Vault of Het.
Yeah, they could have all been vaults.
Yeah. But
Presto change, movie magic.
But I mean, look at the images of the Tomb of Het. It literally looks like there could be something in there.
Yeah, it's just a weird.
Remains.
When they made the first one or two, I think they made two of them at once. When they made those, they just could have. The artist must have just done what they wanted, and they didn't really think about it. Because this came out with Diamond in the Rough.
Yeah,
the first two came out. Scabaras and Apmeken. Scabaras got one for after Diamond in the Rough, and Apmeken got one if you also did Do No Evil.
Do No Evil. Yep.
And then they've continued the other Crondis and Het ones with Menaphos. Yeah, just a weird kerfuffle. So it gives Het some flavor. He's more interesting because of it.
The one and only.
This historical footnote.
Yeah,
of weird retcon.
All right, Scabaras,
Bug Boy.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way of putting it.
The most recent, probably the one that needs this the least.
Yeah, but, because of the big discussion in, of course, beneath Scabaras' sands, amongst other things.
Right.
And also the one who was the most set up.
Right, because the early Desert series with dealing with Scabaras in Contact was dealing with Scabarites.
Yeah.
Followers of Scabaras.
Scabaras was kind of set up as being a really major part of this quest, and his absence, I think, was kind of notable from the Menaphos series.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of how prominent he was in the earlier quests, or how prominent his followers were.
How prominent his followers were, because
the
issue with his the plot, the ancient plot of dealing with Scabaras is that Scabaras is so absent that Amascut is able to come in and pose as Scabaras to his high priests, and that's how she corrupts them all.
Right.
And speaking of that corruption, it's the Scabarites and the followers of Scabaras that effectively build our Sophanum Slayer dungeon. With the corrupted creatures there.
Yes. And all the area under, was it Ulick?
Yeah, Ulick.
Yes, so we do have a lot with Scabaras' followers early in the series, but it's because he's so absent. And then it's not until zoom all the way to last month, this month, recording this on the 30th,
time is lie.
30th, 31st, depending on what time zone you're in right now. we finally actually get to meet him. Pretty much realized, as I think, would we say, as we all expected, the isolation wisdom probably not corrupted. It might be a surprise if you're expecting some corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I
That
think
being
that.
said,
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh,
No. I'm going to go off on a tangent. So
I was also going to go off on a tangent. So
excellent tangent off.
Okay. I think that the interesting thing about how they did Scabaras has to do with like the little Scabarites he has that represents different little bits of him. I feel like that's an idea that was kind of taken from the Zolo from the Orphan Dig site. I feel like that was kind of like how they were operating, is like as a split single consciousness. They kind of apply that lesserly to Scabaras, and I wonder if that was like a commonality in like Rowley's narrative designs for both these pieces of content, since he was involved in both.
It certainly makes, if that's the case, it certainly makes Scabaras one of the scarier and more dynamic ones out of all the ones we've talked about in the Pantheon so far.
Yeah, it's just really cool, like doing the emotions that way with little different individual bugs.
So, Zerdone's your tangent?
So there's I don't know exactly when this was added, but there's an interesting conversation that Jex has. So we mentioned Jex a couple of times. Jex is a priest in Sophanum. He was added with early Sophanum desert quests. He's been in the game a long time. For the longest time, he was sort of the main source of information on the desert gods. And he has a little blurb about each of the minor desert gods if you talk to him. His dialogue about Scabaras is very interesting. And this definitely predates the most recent series of quests, although I don't know exactly when it was added. It may go all the way back to
So let's put an asterisk beside it to see if it remains relevant.
So what he says is that you ask Jex to tell you about Scabaras, and he says, you've probably already learned a lot, but general knowledge isn't always the most accurate. There are details of Scabaras' fall from grace that are only known to the priests. Some of his supposed faults can be forgiven, but I can't explain why.
Yeah, I don't know how that relates to anything we currently have.
It's interesting because, I mean, it might relate to the idea that the Scabarites aren't actually following Scabaras when we deal with them in the quests.
Mm-hmm.
Like it might be a coded reference to that. Like, because as you said, Amascut posed as Scabaras to incite the Scabarites into becoming hostile.
Right.
So there might be be looking at the implication, Scabaras has turned evil, but no, actually he hasn't.
Oh, so are you saying it's Amascut behind all this then?
Well, I think that's kind of the implication.
Like that's what you can kind of read between the lines of, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the implication of that the quests themselves lead to. I think there's also an element of, because we can kind of, I think, make this fit into current storytelling with because Scabaras has been gone a long time. So it's really easy for negative opinion of him to develop, particularly as a result of the Scabarites becoming hostile, but also just because, where is he? What's he doing to help? We fixed all the others. Where is Scabaras? And, maybe there's a reason that he has gone away, why he's hiding.
And that could be, an interesting angle for them to pull on in these final two quests, maybe. Because, again, I'll point out, showdown with Amascut.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Maybe one more notable thing about Scabaras mention, it's just for the immediate future, is that while the other three have had their piece of Tumeken taken from them and Amascut has it, Scabaras is hidden somewhere, so that I assume he knows where, and we have to go get it because of the ultimatum that Amascut gave us. So I assume we'll probably be working with Scabaras or at least talking to him to see where it is in the next quest.
And then that puts Scabaras in a different vein as the other three in
A little
terms
more
of just bringing it
immediate
more to the
development.
forefront. Then
A little
Right.
bit more actively involved.
He's ensured job security.
He's got
That's
a
a good
place
way
in
of
the
putting
story.
He's you're not putting me off screen yet. I didn't tell you where it is.
And, when it comes to the way RuneScape quests work, what's to say we're just being played, in some sort of huge loop-de-loop thing on this, as the character most often is. I don't know. I know that sounds cynical, but how many times in situations like this have we wound up being, thinking we're doing the right thing, and we wind up, unleashing some greater power that we shouldn't, that we need to fix.
As an address
Always
quest.
and forever.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the one I had in mind, or don'ts. So, moving on from Scabaras, we of course have Icthlarin, and maybe Icthlarin deserved his own episode. I don't know.
We'll breeze by as best we can.
Yeah, I don't know if he needs.
There's a lot
that,
that's not
but
desert relevant.
Yeah.
right, and see, that's the thing. I think that when you look at Icthlarin, you're in a position where you think, oh yeah, we know lots about him, but he hasn't really featured in a desert quest for a long time.
He's
Pretty
one
much
of the few god characters who was mostly on our side.
Yeah.
So he tended to show up a lot in Six Age quests as
Right.
just kind of like a cheerleader for us. Because he's someone we could interact with, and he has no ulterior motives. He doesn't really care. I mean, he cares, but he's not really invested in what's going on. He just wants us to succeed so he can get back to work.
The biggest time that he cared was when we were starting to mess with necromancy.
Yes.
Needed to make sure we do it properly.
And when Sloske kidnapped Harold, and death wasn't happening anymore.
Yeah.
Or
That was
directly interfered with his job.
right. And, again, Halloween event, necromancy, Sixth Age, Elder God Wars. Icthlarin's there, but Icthlarin made his initial debut in Icthlarin's Little Helper way back in the day, which, we talked about what that means for a quest and how that quest plays today. I don't necessarily, think that going forward in these final two quests that Icthlarin is probably going to have a huge role, because I feel like Icthlarin's character, as far as her character is concerned, is very fleshed out.
I don't. Well, I agree with that, but I don't agree that he's not going to have a role, because right now I think Icthlarin and Scabaras represent two different extremes for how to deal with Amascut. And so I think the final confrontation is going to have to involve both of them, because there's a fundamental narrative tension here. Is Amascut redeemable?
Right. Right.
And he hears most about that.
And you remember, kind of tangentially related to that, how apprehensive Icthlarin got when we mentioned to him we found the Sanctum of Rebirth.
Right.
So that's the future angle on that. And I feel like in the Desert quest line, he really didn't feature that much in Menaphos. And if you go back in time, it was really just Icthlarin's Little Helper, pretty much, wasn't it?
Where he barely appears. Like,
Yeah.
his role in Icthlarin's Little Helper is he shows up and he fixes us.
Yes. Yeah, not very much. I think that so he has his. I guess maybe we should define his role a little bit. Like, the reason that he's in like Missing Presumed Death and Nomad's Elegy is because he has a role in the underworld process, and I think this is very ill-defined why Icthlarin and Amascut are so deeply tied to like natural processes, and I guess Elidinis as well with the rebirth, like how that came about.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever gotten a good answers. Like, these things must have been happening before they exist. Like, they weren't there from day one, like Gothics and the Druids and whatnot.
Right, we've had some conflicting lore on this because, like, when they were first introduced, they kind of make sense, again, in that sort of broader ancient Egyptian context, where Icthlarin is the ferryman. He basically serves the function
Guides,
of a Pharaon, where he's taking the souls of the dead into the underworld for their final judgment.
Right, 2015 Halloween event.
But then once we started getting the Sixth Age, we started getting some lore about Herald, Death, and how he was the first human who died. And according to some kind of magical law, that means he created, like, that was the creation of the afterlife. He became the psychopomp. He became the Grim.
Well, then we got later in was it Sanctum, the lore book, where it was actually, they say Guthix created the afterlife by manipulating those 4 necromancy elements.
Right, which doesn't really fit with other lore we had in, like, the Fremennik Quest series, for example, where we have every world has its own afterlife.
Right.
So yeah, the Fremenniks, they're not from Gielinor. They're from another planet.
They more identify with a different planet, yeah.
So when they die, they don't go to Icthlarin. Herald takes them to Valhalla. Or whatever. I don't remember if they called it by something, a different name, but it's basically Valhalla.
I think it's just called the Fremennik Afterlife. Yeah, the Great Hall in the Sky, you know.
Right. It's functionally, it's RuneScape's answer to Valhalla.
Right. So he has a very nebulous role. Like, we know he's, like, tied to the underworld and that we know what his role is, but how he got there is still not totally clear. I think, was it in Ode of the Devourer where he said that Tumeken entrusted him and his sister to do these roles? So apparently Tumeken had authority in assigning this.
Which sort of makes sense, because Tumeken was the first god after Guthix, and Guthix didn't really...
Yeah.
Guthix took a really hands-off approach to management, where Tumeken seems to have been a little bit more hands-on. So it would make sense that he might have done something to form the afterlife.
Or find it, what he found.
The other sense that I got, and maybe this is just me projecting, but I got the sense that when Icthlarin tells us that, he meant, like, this was my father's final request. So the sense I got was that Icthlarin's role in the afterlife happened after Tumeken blew himself up. Or maybe very shortly before. So
that would have been a long time without that happening. Like, maybe that was just all the souls were just been wandering then, trying to find their afterlives then alone.
Right.
That could have been the heyday of maybe?
Maybe. Or maybe Tumeken had been doing it before.
Yeah.
And then he was like, I'm going away now. My son, you must carry on.
I think is probably the first option when you look at everything that, has been laid out, and in particular, the showdown between us and that avatar of Amascut in Ode of the Devourer, which, had the implication that at some point we will be facing Amascut in the Shadow Sands, and the way Icthlarin was standing there with us, I think implies that it probably wasn't, the graceful passing of the torch, like you were mentioning, Zerdones, from Tumeken down to Icthlarin, but just something that happened after Tumeken blew himself apart.
One other thing of Icthlarin I feel is worth mentioning is how one trick he can be sometimes. Most notably in Ode of the Devourer, like, he tells us the story about when he went find the Majrat across the cosmos, and then when a similar situation, world-ending in his eyes with the Tumeken Zaros War, when the world-ending Elder God situation comes up, he goes to do the same thing. Granted, it's also to avoid Azenadrix, because he hates the Majrat guts. Yeah, but really, he's like, I'm going to peace out and try to find some warriors across the cosmos again. Didn't work out.
Yeah, that worked so well.
He came back, like, yeah, I found nothing. Let's go get this not necromancy artifact instead with Ayahet. But funny that if I had a nickel for every time, I'd have 2 nickels.
And that's not a lot, but it's weird that's happened twice.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact you can kind of tee those up probably says what you need to know about this. But, you know, I think it comes back to that entire aspect of, or avatar rather, of Amascut, and what we started this entire quest line with the Sanctum of Rebirth, and Icthlarin's concern on that for what his role is probably, you know, going to be going forward in this in the final two quests here, if I had to guess. So,
All right, the big one.
Yep, the big one, Amascut.
Big one, the villain.
Yes,
Everybody loves a villain.
we'll take it from the beginning. At some point, she became a god because, like her brother Tumeken and Elidinis, smushed their bits of godly energies into their pets.
Oh yeah.
This one being the cat.
This one was the cat. She was entrusted with rebirth, which seemed to be something she inherited more from her mother. It seemed like Elidinis is like very tied with like the gate of Elidinis and whatnot,
which is now, you know, opposite end of Icthlarin. So
right.
Yeah, well, they always had complementary functions.
Mm-hmm. And it seemed to be going. She was there when Icthlarin was recruiting. This is Oda the Devourer lore. Or even Majorate memories. She was there when Icthlarin was recruiting the Majorate on Freniske, and something was happening with Ma where she was losing too much power, and she gave up a portion of herself to stabilize Ma, and that portion of her she gave up was the Tumeken half. So she still has the Elidinis half, gave up the Tumeken half. That is important for later.
Yeah.
When she came back after the Zaros Caridian War plays out, and the Majorate that she had given up part of herself to save on Freniske mostly betrayed her and her family. Her father does a big ol' self-sacrifice move, and she views that as like a betrayal and abandonment. And then her mother also immediately after the explosion also leaves, more abandonment. So at this point, everyone's abandoned her, and
She doesn't take it well.
She doesn't take it well. And this would have been in the Second Age, which was when Tumeken blew himself up. And unbeknownst, and we don't know exactly how long this took, but at some point in the end of Second Age, early Third Age, she decided no one's worth rebirthing anymore, and she's going to be the Devourer. She's going to instead start eating. But the important part is it's a secret at this point, and she forms the Order of Slayer Masters, and their job is to heroically trapeze across the world and kill things with really big souls, which she is using the machine under Polnivnich to capture and devour. And this is her secret devourer phase. Eventually, it's Cadillacs.
This gets found out. She goes
that she's been doing the devour thing
and kills all the Slayer Masters.
And that's why there's the current Cadillacs and Phasa.
Yeah.
At this point, Secret's out, and then we have like a lot of time where she's just openly the devourer. I think like the priestesses, her priestesses get turned to cats, right?
Yeah. At some point during this process, her priestesses turn against her, and Icthlarin turns them into cats, so that Amascut can't kill them because Amascut is afraid of cats, even though she is herself a cat.
You're pulling strings from my memory.
This is just craziness.
It's all over the place.
A lot of this is 20 years. Well, I mean, a lot of this is early lore.
Yeah.
From when.
Yeah, we're pulling like Smoking Kills and Tale of Two Cats
hence the lore diggers to the point where you.
Yeah, this is the old lore.
She did the conversion to cats because she's scared of cats.
From back, not only before there was really any lore coordination, but when the game was almost proud of the fact that there was no lore coordination. It was just every quest, any JMod
for themselves.
Yeah.
So we have this bizarre mess of lore.
big ol'
With
ancient history.
Amascut.
Isn't there also a part where she's like cursed by her priestesses that she can't hold her true form? She has to
Yes.
like inhabit other human
Right,
hosts.
and that's why like Icthlarin's little
She has
helper.
a couple disguises, yeah, and she needs us.
Icthlarin's little helper, we run into her in human form. Smoking kills. She takes two different human forms.
And then
and
Lady
we kind of
Kelly's the
trick
main
her.
one. Yeah.
Smoking kills is hilarious because she takes two different forms to try and trick us into doing something. And then we end up beating her challenge, and she turns into a Slayer Master just to spite us. And she's so angry
I have
about
no
it.
idea. They got to replace Simona with someone after the finale here.
Do they?
Or just say she's like waking up from a daze and she was always a person, and she'll keep giving a Slayer task, something like that.
Or we'll just do like the God Wars 1 thing, and it's just like, yeah, that's just in the past.
You could. Don't worry about it, man.
Don't worry about it.
I think we've finally gotten to what we can modern day, but like early desert quests. So that was all the history. In early desert quests, it's a lot of her having a disguise and us being duped. Like a lot of it. Starting nowadays with Stolen Hearts and Diamond in the Rough, which is when she gets the Caradib.
To be fair, that started in Claren's little helper, and at least she had the good sense to mind control us in that one.
Yes, then we go to Claren's little helper, where we get mind controlled. We have, like we said, Smoking Kills, where she tries to trick us as Simona and Jesmona. And then I think that's when we start getting to Do No Evil, and that's where we're dealing with Scabaras in Contact, sorry.
So we stopped dealing with her directly.
We stopped dealing with her directly, now we're like dealing with all the things she's done. So she's corrupted the Scabarite priest and all of the Scabarites, so we fixed that. She's corrupted the 3 lesser gods that aren't Scabaras. We fixed that. Meanwhile, in the background, we get something kind of key to this series is you get a lot of post-credit scenes where the player isn't present. So like at the end of Diamond in the Rough, we see a post-credit scene of Jabari meeting with the Wanderer that gives us Icthlarin's little helper quest in a tent. And at the end of all the Menaphos quests, we see her scheming with the Caradib and the Pharaoh.
Right, because the Menaphos quests, their main plot mostly deals with the whole Menaphos succession storyline, which is a separate thread in the Desert series. But the twist, if you can call it a twist, is that Amascut is secretly manipulating events behind the scenes so that she can uncover the Soul Altar.
Right, and
which she needs for nefarious reasons.
Apparently, it does something with the Soul Altar and the Caradib and sacrificing some thralls. At the end of Fight Club, we see what are thralls even for? Not for sacrifice. Character sees. What was that?
I said, and what are thralls even for, if not for sacrifice?
Oh yeah.
And I just want to say at this point, I think it's clear why Amascut appears at the end of beneath Scabaras' sand, and why the boss encounter is going to be showdown with Amascut.
Oh yeah. Finally, things are ramping up here with like Ode and beneath the Scabaras sands, where like she's taking more recent notice of us after this long period of not interacting with her. Her avatars are very imposing and featured in the boss fight concept art, so probably play a factor. And then beneath Scabaras sands, we get a slight plot contrivance in that she just decides now to give us an ultimatum to like, okay, this didn't work out. You just go get the thing I've been looking for, or else. But
yeah, like if you think through the timeline, it's really weird because canonically, the first time we encounter her is Stolen Hearts.
Yes.
And Diamond in the Rough ends with us foiling her plan, and she swears revenge.
Mm-hmm.
We then have 3 quests where she's doing schemes to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then she just disappears for what is in universe like 11 years of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly she just pops up again. She's like, right, you. I hate you.
Well, I mean, we got to chalk that up a bit to the real world factors of the 6-stage detour.
It doesn't make it not funny.
Right.
The fact that we eventually just get to an ultimatum where she could have just told us this at the beginning to do everything.
Right.
Like, and so much tricking.
And I think we said in either this most recent quest or the one before it, if the 6th age didn't happen, you would have still been able to pick up this quest line
Right.
before
Because
before the world wakes.
Every desert quest before Ode of the Devourer is 5th Age.
Or ambiguous in the case of the Menaphos ones.
Yeah.
No, the Menaphos quests are 5th Age.
Oh, really? Even though they were 2017.
They're at least Desperate Times, because Osmond shows up in the council scene in Desperate Times as the Pharaoh of Menaphos.
Okay.
Well, it can be wherever you want it to be. Like, if you look by timeline sort in the quest journal, it does put them somewhere. It puts them before Wagothic sleeps. All the way, Fight Club is before Wagothic sleeps. But if you want to play by age sort, that's on you as well.
Fight Club is considered a 5th Age quest, according to the wiki.
Yep, before.
Which cites Mod Rowley's Twitter account, and I guess he would know, so...
Yeah, hence why he was the
nothing too
the
crazy.
original
We do
one
have
behind
the
this.
long period there where Osmond was clearly in charge because he was at the Saren Council.
Right.
But yeah, so where we're at with the Amascut now is she's making us go find Scabaras' light, and then we will meet her before the new moon outside of Menaphos, which is probably a boss fight.
And story complete. We think.
To be continued.
Sans 2 quests.
To be continued at the end of what have you. And, that kind of leads into how we want to, wrap this, is that, is there any final thoughts we have on the Pantheon in general after this discussion here? Because it's clear that, some are very minor characters are going to remain that way, but there's also ones that, are going to be there, and we're going to be leaning on heavily, specifically Amascut, Scabaras, probably Icthlarin, and hopefully Tumeken as well in some way.
I thought we would talk most about Icthlarin, but I think it actually ended up being Amascut, which is probably for the better.
Yeah, that's for the best. And I mean, if we wanted to do a Icthlarin lore diggers on everything he did in the Elder God War stuff, maybe you could do that. I don't necessarily know if that is something that's needed, or if there's enough for that, because there were certainly lots of roles that he played there that aren't desert related. So
leave a comment or hit us up on Discord if you want an Icthlarin lore diggers.
We could rope that in right next to the Majorat of the Day story that we could do at some point. So, I don't know. I'd like some resolution on the entire, family dynamics that have gone on here without, leaning too much into the tropes of the past quest, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we're mainly, in terms of the Pantheon, the main two threads are what happened to Scabaras' Shard of Tumeken, and then what are we going to do with Amascut? Those are the main dangling threads. Can Amascut be redeemed? I mean, no, obviously the answer is no, because we fight her as a boss.
Yeah, and I mean, we know that, so it's not too far of a stretch to imagine.
Punch her, and that will fix her. Perfect.
Yeah. And, that's where those final 2 quests go. And I guess the thing that comes up with this and our discussions on Tumeken, is this the return to interpreting higher deity-like characters, specifically Tumeken in this case, interpreting them in the way that they should have done that without doing the 6th Age, like through their followers?
I do think there's a version of this where they don't lean very hard into like a Tumeken personality and treat it more like a force of nature.
Sure.
More like the trauma, the reason, the Amascut, it doesn't matter like what the consciousness of Tumeken is saying. It's like that's just all echoes. It's all the past. It's all something to be dealt with, not something to work with. And that could get more towards that like ethereal godliness that maybe could evoke those feelings.
I know this probably isn't the venue for this, but what's the next storyline after the desert storyline is done? Do they springboard off this into something else? Going back to Zemregal or something a little bit celestial, maybe, or is it something else entirely different?
I think the next 2 quests after the finale are, well, maybe not 2 quests, but the next set of quests after the finale are launch content for the new area, and then the quests you release 2 or 3 months after it's launched is continuing the Zemregal, Bilrock, Moya stuff in the new area. I think you do standalone stuff, and then you do a continuation.
Yeah, I think there's room to do a little bit of a breather, sort of like what they did with the Legacy of Zamorak,
like the Succession Civil War thing.
Yeah,
I was thinking along the lines of like the Arc mini quests. You have like a segment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's also fair.
You would like the Arc, wouldn't you?
Oh yes, it's a little stuff to like explore the new area. I think that by time we finish the desert finale, we're like probably a month or 2 from the new area, maybe 3.
Maybe.
I don't think there'll be quests in between.
I think we're probably looking at that for the end of the year, but
yeah. Like I think we're in like the boss in probably July.
Yeah.
So if we get the area in like September, that's like usually their sweet spot for releasing
the big content.
Yeah.
Which we talked about that at some point. That's not necessarily the smartest thing to do with people going back to school and whatnot in September, but maybe that doesn't matter anymore given the age of the player base.
They gotta have like metrics on what works or not.
Yeah.
Maybe school is the time because they got like a college kid demographic where they're no longer off doing summer things.
Maybe.
They get after school hours.
Well, that's the Lore Diggers on the Desert Pantheon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I know I painted it as kind of a grim topic going in, but I think that was interesting and provided a bit of a brief rundown of who everyone is as we head into the final 2 quests of the series. Do either of you have anything to add before we go?
I don't. I think we did good work.
We covered a lot, and also we had the 110 Runecrafting re-examines that definitely compounded on what was already an episode with a lot to say.
Yeah, but as we say, we got the calm before the double XP storm here. Double XP happening in a few weeks. Achievement-wise this week, we had Pero Picante with 99 crafting, Sylvis with 120 necromancy on the 29th, and Asuna 114 with 99 smithing on the 25th. Congratulations, everyone.
Very good.
Well, that's pretty much it for this episode. I don't think there's anything else. That was quite the long one, wasn't it?
We had a lot to talk about.
We did.
It didn't help that Jagex dropped a great big blog post the morning of a record.
Because we would have been fine without that.
Oh, yeah.
But it would have cut out a half hour.
Yeah. But I know there's always people who say, longer podcast, guys, longer podcast, 3 hours, please. No, I can't do 3 hours. I can't do 3 hours.
Yeah.
But in any case, if you want these delivered to you each and every week, head on over to update.show/subscribe. We're on all the major podcast listening services out there: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Amazon, and more. Also YouTube as well, youtube.com/RSBANDB. And that's Google's podcasting platform these days, is YouTube for podcast. So
they killed Google Podcast because they kill everything good.
Yeah. And that's the general thing, folks, is that for it to be a podcast, it has to be on at least, 1 or 2 of these big services outside of YouTube. And you don't find, in the past, you don't find many of the RuneScape ones that have actually done that. So that's a key aspect of podcasting. But as I say, that's it for this episode of RSBANDB Update. Thank you both for being here. Anything else before we go?
I think I've said everything I have to say about
bring on the next quest.
The next quest, the next lore piece, something to that effect. Alrighty, sounds good, everybody. Well, we'll see you guys next week for another episode of RSBANDB Update. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.